up in global business, Chinese Vice President Han Zheng meets U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and U.S. Secretary General on sidelines of UN General Assembly. China pledges to further improve the business environment for foreign companies. The United Auto Workers strike has entered its fourth day, but despite what negotiators described as reasonably productive discussions, there is still no agreement in sight. Hello and welcome to this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Guanxin in Beijing. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng says that China supports the UN in playing a central role in international affairs and will always contribute to world peace, global development, and international order. He made the remarks when meeting with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the sidelines of UN General Assembly High-Level Week in New York. Guterres thanked China for its firm support for the UN cause. Han Zheng also met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Han says a healthy and stable relationship not only benefits the two sides, but also the world. He says China's development is an opportunity rather than a challenge, a gain rather than a risk to the United States. And the two sides have every reason to achieve mutual success and common prosperity. Han says China hopes the U.S. will take concrete actions to create favorable conditions and do more to enhance mutual understanding, mutual trust, and mutually beneficial cooperation so as to bring relations back to a sound, stable track. And Blinken says the U.S. hopes that China will succeed and continue to promote world economic growth. He says the U.S. looks forward to strengthening communication with China, managing differences, advancing cooperation, and steadily developing their relations. The 2023 SDG Summit is still ongoing in New York. The two-day summit opened on Monday to galvanize global action on sustainable development, and world leaders have reaffirmed their commitment to the plan, and global issues such as climate change and conflicts are on the agenda. And for more details, let's cross to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. Hi there, John. Good to see you again. So the focus is sustainable development. What's the latest?
Yeah, that's really been the focus. You know, it's a funny old thing, Guanxin, but this General Assembly, there has several opening days. The first one was a couple of weeks ago when it got underway. Yesterday, Monday, was, I suppose, the first day that all the media turned up to report on it. And today, Tuesday, will be the beginning of the leaders' speeches. So kind of three beginnings to this. But you're absolutely right. That first day was dominated by the meeting between the Chinese Vice President and the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the Chinese Vice President meeting with the Secretary General as well. But it was also dominated by the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is in two areas. First of all, the Clinton Global Initiative is very keen to develop that theme much further and more quickly. But also the UN itself on Monday had a very important leaders summit on the issue of Sustainable Development Goals. They are 17 in total. They're supposed to be ready and completed by 2030. But the UN is far behind its goals for these. Now, there are things like, for example, making sure there are no starving people in a world that is plentiful, a seat in every classroom for every child, stopping parents from having to witness their children dying from illnesses which are preventable, and what the Secretary General calls the devastation of climate change. Now, they're at the halfway point. This plan for sustainable development was set up 7 years ago. There's obviously another 7 years to go until 2030, and Guterres yesterday lambasted everybody in the opening speech, trying to raise the funding for this from the billions to the trillions. Now, unfortunately for the UN, it was overshadowed by the Iran-US hostage swap brokered by the Gulf state of Qatar. That dominated the headlines and has now changed the tone of the General Assembly for the week ahead. I think it's going to be dominated by Iran and what may come out in future relationships. President Ibrahim Raisi speaks this afternoon here at the General Assembly, and also dominated by Ukraine, of course. Later on today, we'll hear from President Biden. He will speak in the next hour or so, and he's going to meet President Zelensky, who is the Ukrainian president, and he's in New York at the moment, and then he's going to go to the White House later in the week on Thursday. So today, in the next hour or so, we'll hear from the Secretary General. He will get on his main theme, which is climate change. And then we'll hear from President Joe Biden, and then we'll hear from President Raisi much later this afternoon. If I can just quickly throw forward to tomorrow, Wednesday, another very big day for the UN. They're hoping it won't be overshadowed by major news. It's called the Climate Ambition Summit. It takes place all day Wednesday, and it's designed to showcase ideas to curb and stop climate change. Guanjin?
A lot to look forward to. Thank you very much for all that information. That's John Terrett for us in New York. Well, back in 2015, the UN set 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 to facilitate universal cause to improve people's livelihoods and protect the planet. And these goals include tackling poverty, cutting emissions, and reducing inequality. The UN aims to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere by 2030, to cut emissions by half by 2030 and limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius degree above pre-industrial levels, and to narrow inequality based on income, sex, age, disability, race to achieve long-term growth. And now for more on this, we're joined by Guan Dabo, Chair Professor in Climate Change Economics at Tsinghua University. Thank you so much for your time today, Professor Guan. So your latest report provides an in-depth analysis of carbon dioxide emissions from 50 emerging economies. What are some of the key findings and insights on emission patterns and trends?
Yes, we have been working on the emerging economies, especially on the small and medium-sized emerging economies and their emission patterns over the last 20 years or so. So what we have found that, well, China has been stabilizing and flattening their emissions over the last couple of decades. Many small and medium-sized emerging economies such as Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Ethiopia, South Asian countries and African countries, their emission has gone really, really fast over the last 10 years or so. Many of them have doubled or tripled their emissions, especially Laos and Myanmar. Their emission grows 300 to 600% over the last 10 years. And this is largely triggered by their early stage of industrialization and fossil fuel use. So what we try to say here is that although Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, each individual of them doesn't account a significant amount of the emission in terms of a world total, if we group them together, all 60 of these emerging economies altogether, they are ranked as the third largest emitter in the world. So they will be the emission giants in the future.
Well, accurate carbon accounting is crucial for emissions reduction efforts. In what ways do you hope your research contribute to strengthening the scientific basis for climate action in developing countries?
Yeah, we construct this carbon emission account data sets called SEES over the last 25 years or so, is trying to provide and establish accurate emission accounts for developing countries. The key reason for doing that is the least developed countries, especially Africa and the South Asian countries, doesn't have sufficient capacities or resources to establish the emission inventories for them. And then we do it for them because this is gonna serve as the basis for any climate goals we're trying to achieve or any of the Paris Agreement goals we want to achieve. The data serve the basis for that.
And what role can emerging economies play in global climate governance? What recommendations would you have for these countries to balance their development needs with climate commitments?
The developed countries such as US and EU have promised us delivering $100 billion per year to developing countries in terms of technology and financial aid, but very, very little has been delivered. So the emerging economies, especially global South countries, now they need to work together, not only because they are the major contributor to the emission, but also they are the victims of the climate change. And we have seen a huge amount of extreme weather events and happen to China and then to India and to many other developing countries. And as a whole, the developing countries, they are gonna make a great voice and they work together to break the walls between them in terms of technologies. They can share like environmental friendly technologies and achieve green development eventually themselves. Because green development will leave no regrets for any of the developed countries' future development, because they change a different way to develop, and then they will fulfill both needs from climate and also development perspectives.
Indeed, developed countries also need to play their fair share. Thank you very much for your analysis. That was Guan Dabo, Chair Professor in Climate Change Economics at Tsinghua University for us. And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on the program. China pledges to further improve the business environment for foreign companies.
A global recovery on shaky foundations, rampant inflation, cost of living crises, and climate catastrophes straining national budgets. How can we bolster cooperation to stabilize the global economy? Join CGTN at the 5th Bund Summit in Shanghai. We'll explore how China aims to foster an open global economy, build consensus, and unlock new opportunities. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. A recent survey conducted by the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai has found that U.S. companies in China have a low level of optimism about the next 5 years in China, with participants citing the slowing Chinese economy and pressure from the U.S. government to decouple from China. In today's press conference held by China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a reporter asked what China plans to do to support American companies during the next 5 years, and spokesperson Mao Ning had this to say.
I suggest you to learn these supportive measures from related administrative units of China. What I can tell you is China's economy has strong resilience with great potential and vibrancy. Its basic long-term positive fundamentals have not changed. Its advantage of large-scale market and complete industrial system has not changed. China has recently released a series of targeted measures to attract foreign investment, which have been welcomed by foreign investors. China will continue to support foreign companies to invest and operate here in the country and will dedicate to provide optimized business environment for all foreign enterprises.
China is ramping up support for international companies. The governor of the People's Bank of China, Pan Gongsheng, announced fresh efforts to stabilize trade and improve the business environment for foreign companies in China. Pan outlined the initiatives during a conference at which international firms including JP Morgan, HSBC, and Tesla were present. The announcement complements a series of commitments made by top government bodies in China to make its market more accessible for overseas investors. But Shanghai is becoming the preferred destination for foreign financial institutions in China. Currently, nearly 1/3 of licensed financial institutions in Shanghai are foreign invested. As of the end of last year, foreign banks have set up 41 foreign-funded corporate banks, 116 branches, and 135 representative offices in China, with total assets reaching 3.8 trillion yuan. Meanwhile, a total of 68 foreign-funded insurance institutions and 79 representative offices were set up in China, with total assets exceeding 2 trillion yuan. Shanghai has been simplifying procedures and releasing policy support to make its market more accessible for foreign investors. Earlier today, our Lily Liu spoke with Ceteris Group chairman Rani Jacques to capture his insights on China's transformative journey towards high-quality growth.
I think, Lily, the Chinese government has been liberalizing the market now for the past 30, 40 years, which is significant. And I think that this is a huge accomplishment to do so, and they continue to do so. One, it increases confidence. Second, I think that the rules are extremely clear and straightforward, which will be pro-business. And again, the most important is the innovation in China, the quality of innovation. And as I mentioned last time, China is transforming from quantity of development to quality. And we believe that the quality now and the vision for the next 10, 15 years is very impressive. In addition to that, on number 3, look at, for example, Hainan, how the incentives in Hainan for foreign investments and foreign capital coming in, whether in life sciences for drug development or drug usage, taxes, and other areas. So I think that the government has done an amazing job, very consistent, and I think that there's a lot of room for opening up in the future, which should be very attractive for capital to be invested in China.
Looking forward, how will Cedros move in China market and also ensure even bigger influence and impact here?
We're very bullish on the Chinese market and its prospects. We'll be increasing our investments and our capital in China. Opportunity is vast, and the Chinese market cannot be avoided. It's over 22% of the world markets. So every company must have exposure in China and should have exposure in China. And there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of innovative companies that are growing in China. The other factor is that we want to be known and increase our influence not only by investing our capital or our clients' capital, but also by helping bringing great technology, great foreign companies to China and co-invest with us or set up companies in China to have a business there. And we also want to have a lot of influence on Chinese companies and Chinese entrepreneurs to be able to help them navigate investing their money or getting their product outside China. Promotion of the Chinese markets, educating people on the Chinese market, I think is a very important role to play.
Representatives from more than 110 countries have confirmed their participation in the third Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation in October. China's Foreign Ministry announced it on Tuesday. The event will include 3 high-level forums on connectivity, green development, and the digital economy, and another 6 forums, 3 of which will focus on smooth trade, people-to-people exchanges, and think tank exchanges. Over the past decade, 152 countries and 32 international organizations have signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative. As the initiative hits its 10-year mark, CGTN reporters have traveled to 22 Belt and Road nations across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America to uncover stories of collaboration, transformation, and people-to-people exchanges within the framework. Starting from Beijing, they have embarked on a 4-leg journey to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. In this episode, Liu Jiaxing visits Jizan in southern Saudi Arabia, where Chinese companies have built a brand new commercial port and coastal park in Jizan Economic City.
What was once a desert has clearly made a difference. Close to the Red Sea, about 80 kilometers away from Jazan in southern Saudi Arabia, with the coastline stretching for 11 kilometers, a 103 square kilometer Jazan Economic City has begun to take shape. The economic city plans to integrate oil refineries, power plants, shipping ports, administrative areas, and living areas together. This modern commercial port, where I stand, is part of Jazan Economic City. It connects to Eurasia in the north and the Gulf of Aden in the south, an important maritime channel. It's the first port in Saudi Arabia that a Chinese company has designed, built, and then participated in an operation. Starting from 2013, engineers of China Harbor Engineering Company settled in Jazan. In the past 10 years, they have repeatedly won the recognition and trust of the owner, Saudi Aramco, with their professionalism and innovativeness. Not only have ports and roads and bridges been built, but also a seaside park that benefit local citizens have been constructed by them as well. In September 2022, the commercial port officially entered the operation stage. This project has made the long-term passive situation of the southwest region of Saudi Arabia without modern ports a history, and is expected to promote the economic and social development of this region. Well, it's been an important cooperation project for China to implement the Belt and Road Initiative and the Saudi Vision 2030 plan.
And now let's take a look at other business headlines from around the world. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development raised its global economic outlook for 2023 on Tuesday, but cut the growth forecast for next year as interest rate hikes aimed at curbing inflation take their toll. The OECD said the world economy is now expected to grow 3% this year, up 0.3 percentage points from the organization's June outlook, but it will slow to 2.7% next year. Eurozone inflation slowed slightly in August, the EU Statistics Agency said on Tuesday, revising its previous figure. Consumer prices in the Eurozone fell to 5.2% in August, down from 5.3% in July. The agency also said food and drink prices rose by 9.7% in August, revising its 9.8% figure published on August 31st. Over 110 million train tickets were sold from September 30th to September 18th this year, indicating strong demand for travel during the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival and National Day Golden Week holiday. According to China Railway, rail operators have made plans to add over 100 passenger trains a day before the holiday. To the U.S. economy, where America's gross national debt exceeded $33 trillion for the first time on Monday. The U.S. Treasury Department noted the milestone in its daily report detailing the nation's balance sheet. It came as Congress appeared to be faltering in its efforts to fund the government ahead of September 30th deadline. Bank of America said there is a 50% chance that the U.S. government will face a shutdown if Congress fails to reach a solution by the end of this month. The strike by U.S. auto workers could spread to Canada. The United Auto Workers Union represents nearly 6,000 Canadian auto workers. That's as the UAW strike against America's big three automakers has entered its fourth day. Negotiators said there were reasonably productive discussions over the weekend, but an agreement appears nowhere in sight. And our Hendrik Sabrandi reports.
In Detroit this past weekend, members of the United Auto Workers Union had a loud and clear message for their bosses. It was echoed by a prominent U.S. politician.
It is time for you to end your greed. It is time for you to treat your employees with the respect and dignity they deserve.
Time, they all said, to sit down and negotiate a fair contract. Existing deals for 146,000 workers at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis car assembly plants expired last Thursday. With no new contracts, nearly 13,000 of them at 3 factories were ordered onto the picket lines in a targeted action.
These 3 units are being called to stand up and walk out on strike at midnight tonight.
The union is demanding a 36% pay increase over 4 years, roughly double what the companies are offering.
No deal! No deal!
Members are also calling for the end of wage tiers and better pension plans for new hires. Pretty reasonable, says President Biden.
Auto companies have seen record profits, including the last few years, because of the extraordinary skill and sacrifices of the UAW workers. Those record profits have not been shared fairly, in my view, with those workers.
Back in 2007, they gave up cost of living raises and made pension concessions to help car makers survive the Great Recession. Now they say it's time for payback, for companies to share some of their big profits. Some argue the COVID-19 pandemic also upset the status quo and convinced many workers they were being taken advantage of.
And when you are in the midst of a crisis where a lot of things that you took for granted have become unraveled, you also recognize that this is an opportunity to make changes, to move yourself forward.
A recent deal between Teamsters and UPS may also have sent a signal to the UAW that strikes pay off.
I think these workers feel that they now have as much bargaining power as they're ever going to have, and so that's why this strike is happening now.
Companies say union proposals are far too expensive, would make car makers less competitive with their non-union rivals, and that their hands can't be tied as they invest for an electric vehicle future. Workers say they're holding firm.
Now it's time. We need a contract. We need one that takes care of the new hires.
Well, I'm hoping it don't go too long, but if it do, we just gonna stand out here and fight.
It's a battle, one analyst says, that each side thinks is essential to their future. Can they find a middle ground somewhere down the road? Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Detroit.
General Motors says the UAW demands are unreasonable and would cost the company over $100 billion, while Ford says it would have bankrupted the company. Earlier, we spoke to Lauren Fix, the editor-in-chief of Car Coach Reports, who explained why automakers are responding this way.
You have to remember that it uses, to produce all these electric vehicles, you would use 40% less workers. So that will not help the UAW. And they have to invest in electric vehicles whether they want to or not, because the federal government is pushing them to electric vehicles. If they choose not to produce these electric vehicles, the fines are in the billions of dollars. So they're forced to make cars that they take a loss on. Every electric car, not one car company, not even Tesla, makes a profit. Tesla makes their money by selling carbon credits to other car companies that don't make electric vehicles. So when you start looking at how this works, the current administration said, hey, we're going all electric, this will help the UAW, but it's actually not helping the UAW. In order to help the UAW, we need to produce gasoline-powered vehicles, hybrids, some electric cars, and diesel in order to have the profits, in order to give them the pay raise that they deserve. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. And I also think that the executives are getting paid way too much. But there's a happy medium, and these electric vehicles are certainly not helping the UAW or the car companies, and it could cause a bankruptcy if they meet their demands where they are right now. Well, the strike might happen tonight at midnight. We're looking at 3 plants for Unifor, which is the union that's in Canada. They're talking about striking at midnight, so we'll know that in just a short period of time. If that happens, that will hurt the truck business, which is the profit center for all these car companies.
And that will do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. The Hub with Wang Guan is coming up next. Stay tuned.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.